Buonasera, everybody. Good evening. And thank you for staying with the conference right through to Saturday afternoon. It's great to see you all. I want to start by saying a big thank you to all of the committee of the Italians Festival for the warm welcome that you've given us today and for the entertainment that you've given us throughout the week. Especially our good friends Antonino Zito, Michele Baroni and Emanuele Nena from the organizing committee. We are very pleased to be working with you and hope this can be the beginning of a great and fruitful collaboration. But my role now is to introduce three speakers. I'm going to talk myself later, but first of all, we're going to introduce two amazing, wonderful, creative speakers. First of all, Katie Keating, who is the co-founder and chief creative officer, co-chief creative officer of the Fancy Agency in New York. It's a women-owned and women-managed agency, and it's really one of the best and most impactful creative agencies in New York at the moment. So she is a real creative leader and practitioner. Then we're going to hear from Patrick Collister. Patrick is one of our favorite people. We've collaborated with him in many presentations, and we've always found one thing about Patrick. He is the exponent of the unexpected. He is full of curiosity. His career had many years with Ogilvy, a traditional agency where he won numerous awards at Cannes. He then went to RAP, the direct marketing agency, because he wanted to know what really worked in advertising. And then he ended up running the Google Zoo, probably one of the most impactful agencies of the new era. So we'll hear from Patrick in a little while. But first of all, please join me. Welcome Katie Keating of Fancy in New York. Katie.
Thank you. So hello, everybody, and really big thanks to the Italians Festival for including me today. It's really great to be here in two places, or so many places at once, although I can say that after 8 months in my apartment in Brooklyn, New York, I can definitively say I would far prefer to be live in Milan today. So maybe next year. And next year, you know, we say it as if that will be the year that everything goes back to normal. But what is normal anyway? Is it trudging into an office after a long commute, seeing the same people every day, convening in the company kitchen? At my agency, Fancy in New York, we've never operated like that. Normal to us has been an essentially 100% distributed workforce since day one. And we built our agency that way on purpose. Because you see, 9 years ago, when we founded the agency, only 3% of creative directors were women. That meant that even though 85% of buying decisions were being made by women, in 2011, 97% of the people making and approving the creative work were men. So my partner is a creative director as well, and we'd spent enough time at the big agencies to know firsthand why and how women were leaving the industry. The overt and unconscious sexism, the punishing hours, the lack of role models at the top. So we decided to change it. We decided to build an agency that worked for women. Yes, we wanted to reach and portray women in positive ways that we weren't seeing in the industry, but equally important to us was building a culture that would embrace and celebrate top talent by designing the job to fit into their lives and not the other way around. Our fancies, as we call them, might have kids or elderly parents or passions they don't want to give up for the job. And we think that these aspects actually make them better at their jobs. We work with senior level people who we trust to get the job done whenever and wherever they want. We have an office, but we've never required anyone to actually go into it. That means no one even has to live in New York or America for that matter. We value talent over geography. We always have, and we always will. And it turned out that we aren't the only ones who think that working like this makes a lot of sense. Over the past 9 years, women started to hear about the agency and reached out to us. They couldn't believe there was a place that would value them as both professionals and people the way we do. They were sick of advertising as usual and wanted something that would allow them to practice their craft without being tied to their desks, working 24/7, and swirling with layers, egos, and attitudes. When Me Too was exploding through the agency world, even more women began looking for ways to get out of this male-dominated quagmire and started looking for places where they could work in cultures that supported their whole selves, that would encourage them to do work that was interesting and relevant and motivating to women. Our teams are people who've raised their hands and said, I want to work in a new way. I want to build not just a better agency, but a better industry. Naturally, they all wanted to work on Lion's Den. Lion's Den is a chain of adult toy stores in the US that wanted to shift its image from a very male-centric roadside sex toy establishment to a top-of-mind sexual wellness destination for women and couples. I could talk all day about the dramatic change that we've made for the brand, but instead I'll show you the kind of work that happens when people come together with the common mission of elevating what we say and how we say it to women. So you can play the birthday spot.
What makes Granny Granny? First, there's the pork loin. Am I right? And then there's the knitting. That one-piece jumpsuit she made for me sure turned a lot of heads. Yeah. And of course, her collection of glass figurines. Watching your every move. So raise your glasses. Happy birthday!
So over the years, our network of creatives, strategists, account people, producers, and basically everyone has grown organically and through personal connections. We're colleagues, but we're also friends. We've built a culture that values the diverse backgrounds, interests, and passions of our team and the way the work fits into their lives. We've always known the work was better because of this, more authentic, more tapped into the lives of real, actual women and not just a generic demographic of the 18 to 35-year-old suburban mom with a household income of $60,000. But then suddenly in March of this year, authenticity became everything because from the first moments of lockdown, the whole world hopped online and we haven't logged off. We've gotten a peek into each other's lives like never before. We see our colleagues' laundry, their pets, their kids, their partners. We see their makeupless faces, their gray roots, their real selves. We see everything that for as long as anyone could remember had been hidden behind a veil of professionalism and which kept real life at arm's length from actual reality. This way of life was new to most agencies, but not to Fancy. For us, we just kept rolling, expanding our network, bringing more new fancies into the fold, coming together to do what we could in a world where it seemed like none of us could do anything. So here's a spot we made with our group to celebrate the tremendous effort of New Yorkers, the tremendous effort that New Yorkers made to stay home during the time we were the epicenter of the global pandemic. So can play the other spot.
It's a miracle.
So the best part about this new way of working is that it works on a large scale. It works for small independents, it works for large multinationals, and it works for clients too. They've been here and done this. They've moved their business forward, staying connected while working distantly from each other. Talent is no longer local. So what I can say to everybody here is find the company that you believe in, the one that believes in you, the one where together you'll make the world a better place by doing things in a better way. It could be anywhere. And from now on, anywhere is everywhere. So thank you, everybody. And now I'll pass the virtual mic over to Patrick.
Hello there, lovely Italian people, and hello, Katie and Julian and Michele and everybody else. So what I really want to talk about today is the fact that even before coronavirus, advertising itself was pretty unwell. The question I want to ask today is, what kind of vaccine do we need to save our industry? Because make no doubt about it, advertising is sick. So I'm very pleased today to be able to talk on behalf of and with TheNetworkOne, because I genuinely believe that independent creative companies are going to provide the antibodies that will bring our industry back to health. And I promise I'm going to stop this crass metaphor from now on. But I want you to think for a moment about some of the incredible cultural shifts that are happening around us at the moment. You know, so not just advertising, but think in terms of religion, race, and politics. They're all in a state of flux. Do you know, in Europe in the last couple of weeks, there have been beheadings. BLM has spread from Minneapolis across the world. There have been riots in France and Spain in protest at their government's attack on civil liberties. And in the UK, we have Brexit. Meanwhile, in America, 70 million people voted for a man who is a liar and a cheat, but he's preferable to the career politicians who also lie and cheat because he's so obvious about it. Now, here's the thing. In a recent survey in the UK, advertising executives rank even lower than politicians on trustworthiness. So out there, you are less trusted than Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, or even your very own Silvio Berlusconi. And COVID is making this even worse as people start to think about what a new normal might look like. And millions of people do not want the old normal. Millions of people see advertising as belonging to that old normal. The moderates are hoping for a new kind of capitalism that may emerge, but the extremists want to tear down any statue of Milton Friedman. He was the greed is good economist, you may remember from the 1970s, who said that the only purpose a company has is to make money for its shareholders. Now, the extremists see advertising as morally bankrupt and hugely damaging. One economic think tank in the UK has claimed that for every euro of value created by advertising, 11 euros of wreckage is caused psychologically and actually. And in the last week alone, I've been attacked personally on LinkedIn for defending an industry that its critics say is contaminating the planet by encouraging excessive consumption. You know, and sometimes, even though I try, it is really hard to argue back. It's hard to argue back because so much advertising is so bad. Now, I know bad advertising has always existed, but I would say that today, 99% of digital advertising is complete crap. And you know it is too. At least 50% of you in the audience watching this have ad blockers installed on your devices. You are your own problem. Around the world, nearly 1 billion ad blockers have now been installed by people who are just fed up with the garbage that they're being served. So at AdLib, where I am a creative consultant, our mission is to save the internet, you know, because soon you're going to have to pay for all of your content because advertising won't be able to fund it any longer. That's unless advertising can become more relevant, more personal, and actually creatively more intelligent, more likable, more useful, more usable. So AdLib is actually less than 3 years old. I am actually older than the founder's dad, but it's a company that doesn't have to believe in diversity because it simply is diverse. Women, people of color, and even oldies like me are doing what we can under its roof to do advertising better. And right now, there have never been so many startups in our industry. And what's so incredibly exciting is that few of them are starting up in order to make money. Well, that's because there isn't any money to be made, but they're starting up to do things differently, to start up doing things ethically. And of course, what we see are the big network agencies in deep, deep trouble. And they're in deep trouble for two reasons. One is they're inflexible and inhuman in their dogged adherence to income to staff cost ratios. They're Friedman-esque businesses in themselves. And two, they're structured in such a way that they instinctively destroy the very thing they offer their clients, which is talent. And the way they do this is actually through the business model. You know, the country manager of a network agency or a network agency group will look at the numbers, and he is forced always by some bloke in New York to make cuts. He, and I'm referring to he because 97% of them are he, by the way, he is protecting his own €1 million package, annual package, by taking out all of the management layers beneath him, so that the gap between him as the CEO and the people who are actually doing the work gets bigger and bigger and bigger, until eventually it is unsustainable. And then, like CLM BBDO less than a month ago, it closes. Now, for me, the modern agency, I think, is mindful of all its stakeholders. It cares for its people, just as Kate was talking about the way she cares for her people, but they also care for their clients. And in a broader franchise, they care for the customers of the products they are selling. You know, the modern agency doesn't do scam. You know, I'm embarrassed by our industry when I look at Cannes sometimes. A quick little instance of this. In 2016, there were over 60 entries to Cannes with campaigns about the refugee crisis. You know, in 2017, there were almost as many. But really, unfortunately for ad agencies everywhere, Ogilvy won a Grand Prix that year for Refugee Nation, a genuinely great piece of creative work. But as a result, in 2018, jurors said, refugee crisis, we know all about that. And so in 2019, entered to Cannes, there was just one single idea about the refugee crisis. In other words, for agencies, refugees are a crisis that has come and gone. It's a fashion. Whereas if you're a refugee, the crisis remains. The modern agency, as I say, you know, doesn't do scam. The modern agency is not embarrassed to sell stuff. And I want to finish by talking about an agency that launched in COVID, that launched in lockdown, and yet despite everything has been going like an express train. And it's called New Commercial Arts. And the name is important because this is an agency dedicated to the noble art of commerce. And that, I think, is important. It's dedicated to selling stuff, not to purpose, not to politics, but to understanding how their clients can produce products that will help make people's lives marginally easier, marginally better, and talking about those things, using imagination and craft skills to do it. And that, to me, seems to be something to really look forward to. So that's it from me, over and out. And thank you so much for letting me rant for however long it was. Julian.
Thank you very much indeed, Patrick. That was a much deserved rant. And although we hadn't really compared notes between the three of us as speakers, we've each come to this with a perspective that has something in common. And it is a sense of respect for other people. And, you know, we heard that in Katie's talk. We heard that in your talk. And it's a little bit what was making me think when I was preparing mine also. But I was, being not a creative, actually intending to stick to the subject that we had been originally asked to talk about, which was networks. So here is my presentation, and I'm going to talk about networks, but I'm not going to talk about it in a dull theoretical way. I'm going to talk about it in a way which I hope captures a little bit of what I love about Italy, which is art and culture and philosophy and ideas, and a few pictures and not too many numbers. I first came to Italy when I was 14 years old. It was the first foreign country I'd visited, and it's a huge place in my heart. So we're all, and me especially, very delighted to be here. So I'm going to share my screen so we walk you through the slides. Hopefully, one of the tech team will tell me if it's not true. but we have our first slide. So it's new thinking about networks. And there's a few slides, so we're going to jump through these quite quickly. Where do we go down here? So this is my company. We have network in our name and network in our DNA. Our name is TheNetworkOne. We've run our company now for 15 years. We are based on two principles. My old boss in Brazil told me there were only two things you need to know in this business: know how and know who. And I thought that's a nice phrase to begin networking, and stay with it. Whatever else anybody tells you, these are the only two things. You need to know how to do something, and you need to know who can help you and work with you and may be interested in it. Our network is now 1,200 agencies in 109 countries. They're all independent. And if any of you are listening who are independents, we applaud you. And if any of you are listening who are with networks, we'll learn from each other, and that maybe you'll rejoin us one day. I'm not going to name everybody, but these are the many friends that we have made in Italy over the years, starting with the very first agency that we worked with in our whole network, Lorenzo Marini Group, still there, and many other wonderful people have joined us since. But I'm not going to talk about us. I'm going to talk about networks in general. So this is a few thoughts. What is the big network that makes the difference to all of our lives? You know, of course, it is the internet. And the internet expresses what a network is all about. It's not a hierarchy. It doesn't move things in order. It moves things in little packets, in random distributions, and somehow or another, they come together at the end and made the photograph or the film or the document or the image that you hoped would come out of what you put in the middle. It's the thing that has transformed our world more than anything else, and it's unbelievable. This is well worth reading. If you ever did, it dates back to the last century, actually published in 1999, the Clue Train Manifesto. And it was kind of a manifesto of what everybody hoped that the internet would be. And they said three things. They said, it's about customers seeking the voice of a craftsman, very apposite to creativity, the authentic provider to help them facilitate their lives. It's about markets being conversations and not one-way dialogues of somebody talking to you and telling you what to do. And they are facilitators. Networks are great facilitators for the sharing of relevant knowledge within a community joined by like interests. Listening and reacting to those conversations has spelled success or failure ad infinitum. And that is 20 more years old, but it is absolutely what the internet should be. Yes, of course, it has numbers, it has financial value. This is a very fashionable piece of thinking doing the rounds at the moment by Professor Scott Galloway of NYU, New York University. And he measures receptors, which is essentially the data collection facilities and touch points, and intelligence, which is the way that they are used, interpreted, and used to predict the future. And he argues that, the valuable companies, and we see them in the top right, Amazon, Apple, Google, are the ones that really have measured that. When we started our network, ExxonMobil was the most valuable company in the world. Today, it's not even in the S&P 100. It's all about the tech companies that have used the internet. But how have they used it? That's a much more interesting question, because the really interesting people are using networks not like hierarchies. And in our business, we talk about network agencies. And what do we mean by that? We mean companies like WPP, where there's somebody right at the top. There's all these people called the board directors. Then this is just the board. Then there's a level that's kind of one behind them. There's a level that's two behind them. And then there's all the people who cascade downwards. And if you're running a business in a particular country, you are so far down the hierarchy, you're not influential. We don't mean hierarchies. We mean networks. Here's an example of a network. These are the Dabbawalas in Mumbai, and they deliver 200,000 lunches from home kitchen to office every day in Mumbai. How do they do that? 8 million a year or something is claimed, but I'm told it's actually much more than that. And there is nothing written down. It's just a network of people who go from house to collector to railway station to another person and distributes the network throughout Mumbai. Everybody gets their lunch. Absolutely amazing. They are mostly illiterate. That's how a network works, because everybody trusts each other. If you look at a hierarchy, this is a hierarchy. You know, you're Italians. This is from Francesco Botticini, and it's all of the kind of angels arranged in order of hierarchy. This is the WPP of the medieval world. And, you know, it's very interesting and very pretty, but it isn't terribly functional. So let's move on from there. This is going back to the internet. How does this work? Well, the internet, of course, works with little packets of data that go around. But somebody realized that it was actually kind of more efficient if you added a controlling mechanism to this. So they invented something called the transmission control protocol that sat alongside the IP protocol. And that basically determines who gets what where and pushes everything in the right direction. And it is the grandfather of the internet problem that we have today. And if we see here, it is Facebook hauled up before Congress for not allowing what Facebook was originally intended to be, friends networking and talking with all of each other. But it's a mechanism for putting the right message, the message that the advertiser paid for, the message that the political sponsor has managed to kind of intrude into here, into the feed of you and me and our friends looking at Facebook as a network. This is not where we want to be. This is where human networks succeed. It's when they're based on equality and respect and not on ownership and control. And if you want to go back for a kind of theoretical justification of that, here is Friedrich Hegel in the 19th century. And he talks about the master and the slave relationship. And the master thinks he will achieve success by owning the slave. But actually, he fails to achieve what he wants, which is recognition, because the slave cannot recognize the master's superiority if he is not free to do so. That is directly out of Hegel in the 19th century. How relevant today. But you know, why networks? Why are networks so important? Well, you know, what drives us are networks. Our brains are networks. The firing of neurons in different patterns are what creates thought. We listen to Picasso when he talks about children's minds are more creative than adults' minds, and we should go back to being children. There's a great book written by a Cambridge professor, Sarah Jane Blakemore, who talks about the difference between a child's brain, which has many, many more active receptors, and all of those die when you don't feed them with new ideas and new connections. So we become half dead in our brain as we grow up. Creativity is a wonderful random process. This is one of my favorite people, Jonathan Dominitz. He talks about innovation as the juxtaposition of existing concepts. We see it in things like fusion music. This is Jan Gabarek putting jazz together with 17th century choral music. We see it in fusion food. This is Wolfgang Puck in Los Angeles, the original kind of innovator of adding Asian and Western foods together. But there is one thing that we see all drives this. This is where the biggest breakthrough has come in the last 2 or 3 years with machine learning. We used to tell computers that in order to walk and to do things that a robot can do, you had to follow rules. We wrote rules after rules and none of them worked. And now we just let computers figure out it out themselves, because the rules come later. What is important is not the rules. It's allowing people the freedom to create themselves. And this is what we see. This is the last image, and it's a big, important thing for me. It's what's called desire paths. So when they built the new complex at Michigan State University, they put everything in. They put all the facilities, all the buildings, all the technology and everything, except they didn't put in any footpaths. So they waited until the students had used the building for a year, and those students created the footpaths, the places they actually walked along. And after that, after a year had gone by, they went back and concreted them over, and they turned them into this little network, which is sort of follows, that was not created according to rules, was not created according to hierarchies. It was because it was based on the actual behavior of what real people did, and a big organization that respected them and their preferences. And that's really all I've got to say, except thank you for paying a little attention to me and my philosophical ramblings. A lot of attention, I hope, to Patrick for expressing kind of the frustration that we feel when advertising goes wrong, but the power that we feel when it does go wrong. And Katie, who was with us also last week judging our Indie Awards. And one of the things, I'll now embarrass Katie by saying that my team said to her, what a wonderful person Katie is. She's just such a joy to work with. She's always helpful, intelligent, and great. And what is that based on? As her company is. It's about respect for other people and thinking what other people really want to do and not putting them into a box that says you've got to work in the way that the rule makers and the hierarchies and the bosses tell you. So please take that away and think independent and think non-hierarchy, and creativity will come. Thank you all.